Hello, welcome to the May 3rd, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Gundo and I'll be the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, raise my ability to answer all questions excuse me, in a real-time manner. Let me clear my throat. In a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed. And so if you do not see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's version 11, 12, 13, which level, if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which operating system, that information is helpful. Also, we should have all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so you could quickly navigate to different parts of the live stream. We want to give special thanks to, if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in the previous live streams, we have over 32,000 topics that we've covered over the last 4 years. You can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for his work in creating that website. So you can just kind of type in a topic and search for a related video response and go directly to the video and watch it. We also have two moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. They don't work as, they're not Steinberg employees, they just do it to make it a better community experience. So we'll give special thanks to them. And also a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work on the Cubase Nation Discord. So it's kind of an unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Gundo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host today. I'm presenting from outside Washington, D.C. area in the United States. In Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. Okay, so we see Eric Sampson from Paris. His first question is, when I turn a plugin off, does it still use some CPU resources? So there's two different levels of turning off a plugin. So when we come over and we turn a plugin, I may not have a lot of CPU resources going on here, but we'll take a look. Just go to my studio menu. Let's get to our audio performance meter. So if I have kind of a heavier plugin, we turn this off, it's not going to affect the CPU resources because this plugin is still kind of loaded up and ready to go at the moment's notice. So if you wanted to automate, turning this on and off, we could do that. Now, when a plugin is bypassed, so there's a way of kind of turning off the insert or bypassing the plugin. So if you kind of hover over the controls, you'll see that if you hold down Alt or Option, that now when we bypass a plugin, that now that this plugin is bypassed, and if we look at it, we can see that this insert is turned off. This one is bypassed, and this has a darker background, that once we turn that plugin off, we could see that the resources would automatically. So there's a difference between turning the plugin off and disabling the plugin. So we could so it's kind of a two-step process. And once the plugin is bypassed, again, Alt or Option plus clicking on the power knob, then you'll see the performance meter of the CPU kind of creep down and have an effect on that. And you could also watch this latency setting directly here. So you can see with all these plugins on this chain, it's 276.3 milliseconds of latency. And I bypass the plugins, we still had the same latency amount, but if I turn off the vocal chain, we could see that now the latency is automatically compensated. So once a plugin is, or an insert is bypassed, at that point, That will free up the CPU resources and also adjust the latency settings. Okay, Eric Sampson also asks, can you please show us how to input a bass line using the score editor in Guitar tab mode, like I do in Guitar Pro? So I'm not familiar with Guitar Pro, but we'll show you how to do this. Let's say if we have a bass part. Let's come over here to score editor. So the first thing we want to do is, we'll just take it out of tab mode here real quick. Okay, so let's say I have a bass part and I wanted to put it, so we come over here, I'm going to click on the, so if we go to our score settings, so we go to scores, to our settings, or we could just double click right here. We can open up our score settings. So we say we want to be in tablature mode, and for our instrument we want to choose bass, and we'll hit OK. Now we could choose to mirror the staff or not. So when we have it mirrored, we can see the regular musical notation and the tablature here. So if we want to now put in tablature, so I'll just turn off the mirror for now. So we're going to have tablature. Let's say I want to put in quarter notes. I'm going to click. So instead of our musical staff, we have our 4 strings or 5 strings, depending on what you have set up for the bass. I'm going to select a quarter note. I'm going to click right here, and we can see the numbers will appear. So I'm just going to hold down my left mouse button, and I can say, okay, I want this to be a B, and I want this to be on the next string, D, and so, let's say, okay, I want it to be E, and let's put a G here. So now we could just see our different tab numbers. So as we go to click on the string, we could just move, while we're holding down the left mouse button, we could just enter in our particular notes, and we could enter into tab. And if we wanted this tablature to be on a different string, we could right click and we could say move this to string 3, move it to string 2. So, or let's say I want this to be notated on string 4, that we could just come over here and adjust our tablature. And if we wanted to see both of those entered in, we could now, if we want to see how it looks on our score, and we may adjust a clef here for the right octave for bass. And now we could just see the tablature and the score. So you could enter into tab that way, just kind of select the note tool. You can set the rhythmic value here, and as you kind of drop in, you could just navigate between the different strings. If you wanted to switch to strings by default, you can again just right click and move it to different strings like so. Okay. Wonderful to see Patrick on. He's also answering some of the questions. All right. Great to see Stefan from Sweden. Patrick asks, hi Greg, is there a shortcut or project logical editor setting that allows me to apply a select length of fade to an audio region, something that doesn't use the auto fade setting and can be applied selectively using a shortcut? Okay, so let's say if I have this fade here, so let's say I want to do like a 1 second fade in. So let's say I want to come to this event. Let's get to our project logical editor, see if we could build one. I think we can. Give it a shot. Okay, I'll remove this. Okay, so let's say I want it to be 1 second away, or let's say 500. We'll say one second from the end of the event. Okay, so here I want to, let's just check. I'm going to have the event selected. All right, just going to check the name of a function here. Okay, so we're going to choose to locate next event. All right, and then I'm going to transform, but let's say I want to take let's see if we could so I was thinking of doing is move it here, then move it back 1 second, or our time. We may not have to do it in the logical editor at all. Let me just take a look. We may just do it in a macro. So we'll say we'll just say minus 100. Let's see if we could. So I want this to come over here. We'll have that event selected. We go to the end of the event. I want to hopefully navigate back. Let's see if we can make this flexible. So it's always the same condition and not tied to like a bar or beat. Okay, so say we'll make this container type is equal to track. We'll say our position. We'll subtract. Say 200 milliseconds. So let me see what happens. We do this. All right, let me just check the name of this function again so we can. Okay, so let's see if we are here at the beginning of the event. We're going to locate to the end of the event, maybe try to take this track and move it back 200 milliseconds and then apply fade. So let's see if this works. It's going to move that. So once I have that cursor there, if you just hit A, we could adjust the fades to this particular range. So I will see if I could play with this. If we have time at the end, we could take another look. But generally, it's like when we come here, let's say if I hit the A key, that this would do the fades to the range. Let me just. But I know that there's ways I could automatically snap it back. See if we could turn on. Just trying to figure out a way to automatically roll back a certain amount of time from the percentage. So I'll see if I could dial it in. If we have time to get back to it later, I will. But I think that basically what we could do is move. What I'm trying to do is move that cursor from the start of the event to the end. And maybe if we do like a pre-roll. So I might have to do a pre-roll and stop it. And then if we have the range selected, then hit A to do kind of a fade out. But I could spend some more time in kind of getting the macro or project logical editor combination thereof dialed in. Sorry about that, Patrick. All right, wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland. We have Larry B. Great to see you from Brampton, Ontario. All right, so we have a question. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, from Vlad. Can you please tell me how to export stems and tracks for mixing and mastering? Thanks. So it could really depend on, what your requirements are, but let's come over to, if we have a number of tracks like this in a particular project, and we have multiple recordings here, and we wanted to export these. So if you wanted to make kind of like equal length audio files of everything, and I'll just do kind of a smaller section of this, all you'd have to do is go to your file menu. Let's go to our export to audio mixdown. So if you wanted to make stems, we would just choose to have multiple, and then we could choose all of our different tracks. So if we had effects, virtual instruments, they would all show up directly in this particular list. And as we're working with this list, sorry, just had a message pop in. All right, so these are all of our different elements, whether they're instrument tracks, audio tracks, groups, etc. So if we have, for instance, all of my drums going to a group, so I'll just add a group channel to the selected. We'll call my group drums. And we go to our file menu to export audio mixdown. We can now see our group channels and effects channels if we have them in the project. So what a lot of people may do, they may take all of their drums as one particular group, all their guitars, their bass, their keyboards, their vocals, strings, all in, or strings, brass, woodwinds, into different groups. They may export to groups. So if you wanted to just export groups, you could do that just by selecting only the groups, or if you wanted the individual parts to be included as well. So I'm going to come over here. Now we could choose how we want the effects. Do you want them to be completely disabled in Drive for someone else to mix? Do you want to include like your inserts and your channel strip and channel EQ? Do you want to include the send effects so that the send effects are burned into the file? Do you want to include any mastering effects? So you have these different choices. So I'll come over here and say, let's do our groups and sends. And I'm going to, we could create a new project, or I could create audio tracks directly here. And now when I export, we could export all these different, combination of our master mix, our kind of 2-track mix that we're hearing, all of our groups, all of the effects can be separately rendered, as well as all of our files, and we can make these all kind of equal length based on the left and right locator. I'll just make this smaller for rendering time purposes. And I'm going to export and create audio tracks from these. So as we do this, it's going to take each of the individual elements. It's going to create new audio tracks for us. Almost done, and this will be imported directly into the bottom of our project. And we can see now all of our files have been rendered as stems, so you could send that off for mastering. You could have the individual elements, the effects, the groups all rendered, or any combination thereof. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Vlad. Great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And we see Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida. And we have Jason from Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for joining us. A couple people on the west coast of Florida. Throne Music Production asks, is Cubase better to purchase from Splice rent to own? So it's going to be the same functionality, but what Splice offers is the ability, if you don't have the money to purchase Cubase outright, that you could do it basically in installment payments. So the functionality of Cubase is fine. So if you wanted to do a rent to own model, you could use Splice for that. Or if you wanted to purchase it outright, then you could just, buy from a dealer or the Steinberg web shop. So, but the functionality of the program doesn't really matter. It's just whatever makes it easier for you to purchase Cubase. So a lot of people are doing the Splice rent to own, so they don't have to have as much cash outlaid, but you can still own the product once all of your investment is done. All right, wonderful to see Patrick Maynaville A on, and Daniela Tocan from Romania, Danube Delta. All right, and we have Fungu from Shanga from Namibia. Thanks for being on. Great to see Sway TV and Recording Studio. Sorry I didn't see your email for the Zoom link until after the Zoom meeting. Sorry about that. We missed having you. Great to see Spa Dogs from Ontario. We have Peter from Montreal. All right, Windy Shores says, hi, Greg. I was just wondering if it was possible to have the Play Audition tool routed so it could be heard in the Q mixes. So I think what you can do is each of the Q mixes, instead of, when we look at the source here, we could choose the Q or the mix. So if you needed to come over and, let's say we're just listening to our mix here, like so. So we're using our play tool. So this is now routed out through the control room. And I want to listen to Q mix 1. So what you could do temporarily, I think, is just to, within each of the Q mixes, is you could try this, and I don't have this separately routed to 100% confirm, but I'm inclined to think that this might work, is that when you go here and this is set to the mix, that they're hearing the control room mix as opposed to their individual Q mix. So maybe for each of the Q mixes, you could set it to mix as opposed to their Q, and then they might be able to hear it. So usually most people may not want to hear that in the headphone mix, but I would give that a try and see if that made sense and worked for you. All right, so we have a question. Have you ever used Unify or similar plugin chainer? Seems like it could be a useful workaround for lack of native step pattern sequencing, for example, in Cubase. So, I haven't, but I do lots of, there's different step sequencers that you could obviously use, but there's, step sequencing kind of built in to Cubase as well. So if you're not familiar with it, or if it's kind of maybe you want a different approach, but if you wanted to do step sequencing, and people's definitions of step sequencing can vary, which I understand. But let's say if I come over here and I just wanted to put in, so I'll activate step. And now as we've done that, we could just do our step sequencing. So this way we could do, step sequencing once it's activated right there. Now, another approach to doing this could be using some of the MIDI inserts. So let's come over to, even if we wanted to, go to Step Designer, I could just So you could have, like different types of MIDI plugins, and if you wanted even more for doing beats, You could have kind of beat designer plugins. So, there are a number of different, particular plugins for this where, you could probably do a lot of, different step designer type functions. And if you want to even come over to, like some of the factory presets, you could, come over here and have fun with those. But, third-party plugins can be used, but I haven't used any. I've used kind of the built-in functions that are included with Cubase. And we see also just a follow-up comment. Can you do things like chance and probability natively? So just but there's going to be like where we just make sure we're not so if you wanted to reverse the pattern, shift it, but now say I have this step designer and now I wanted to come over here to MIDI modifier. We can now run through, let's say I wanted to change this to a D major scale and I wanted the velocities to be randomized. So you could chain these different MIDI modules together as well. So let's come over here and say, adjust our length. And then if I want to come over here, just put in so you could now just kind of put in all sorts of different MIDI plugins and have these MIDI plugins kind of interact with each other if you wanted to introduce more probability. And then once the data is actually inside of Cubase, at that point you could just simply, modify it there as well. So. All right, so we have a question from Eric Sampson. It says, quick question, in the preferences, user interface, mix console, fader colors, there is a synth channel color. What is synth channel? All right, so let's take a look. Let's do a new project here. It might be an instrument channel, but we'll take a look. So let's say I add an instrument track. Let's look at the preference. So we'll do mix console fader colors. Okay. Yeah, so it doesn't seem like it's an instrument track or Fader colors. I don't know off the top of my head. These all kind of make sense in different channel types. Just try to think of something. Trying to think what that is. I'll see if I can look it up here. All right, let me see if maybe it's a multi-out. So I'm going to come to this instrument. And let me activate multiple outputs. Yeah, so it's when we have like a multi-out virtual instrument. It's probably not the best named device, but so like when we activate like Groove Agent, we could have up to 32 stereo outs. So these are the outputs, the multiple outputs for the virtual instrument. So it's probably not aptly named for synth channel. Should be kind of VSTI multi-output channel, something like that. But that's what it does for you. So. All right, we have Tim K. Says, glad to be here once again, listening and learning. Glad to have you. All right, so we see, yeah, Patrick, you see maybe his question didn't get posted, so hopefully we'll see it in the future coming up. All right, great to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Bealville, North Carolina. Great to have you on the Zoom. Great to catch up with you. Walter Till asks, hi Greg, is it possible to exclude like solo safe a track from automation, read write, so that even when you turn global read or write on, it stays excluded? Not that I know of. Like there isn't an automation safe mode. Usually it's going to be, so let's say if we have multiple tracks, going on, let me just jump to a different project. Yeah, so there isn't a way just to, you know, so even if you turn this on or off, you could, you know, choose to manually deactivate write on a particular button. But, you know, it's one of those things like, you know, a lot of people may only do automation, you know, on a selected track one at a time. So, you know, if you are turning on, if you're enabling automation for the track, it makes, you know, something that you're specifically turning on, that it would automatically kind of carry over and write that automation because you did engage, in telling Cubase that you want to write automation, whether it's globally or not, but there isn't like a automation safe mode that I know of or aware of. You could delete the automation on a particular track if you need it to, but nothing that's kind of a automation filter that I'm aware of. See, Brian Sawyer Senior says, "Hope you're feeling better, Greg." So I am. Thanks for asking. Feel much more normal. All right, and we have someone checking in from Japan, and they're completely in jet lag. So understand the feeling. I spent about 28 years jet lagged, so with my travels. All right, we see Gerald Elion from Martinez, California. Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so Sven Isaacson asks, programming DMX in VST Live is kind of like writing music in Cubase's list editor, even with version 2 plugins. Can you recommend an app, non-rental, that can serve as a graphical front end? So I haven't done much DMX lighting. So, what I have done with some setups for testing purposes was like a simple DMX lighting at the office when I was out for NAMM. But I don't know, let me clear my throat. I don't know of other ones that I could recommend. All right, so we see Robert Higgins. I recorded a voice track on the left channel. I copied that track to the right track, panned them hard left and right. I wanted to sound like I overdubbed on 2 separate tracks. I do not want the vocal doubler sound. I want random sound like 2 different voices singing. All right, so if we wanted to double something like that, because obviously once you work with a particular project, if you copy something, it's going to be exactly the same. So something that you could do, like especially with a vocal track. So I'm not sure if you've done a lot with tuning, but let's say if we're here,
Do you recall the day we first met?
so say I want to take this vocal and let's double it. All right, so I'm going to just right click and let's duplicate the track. Okay, so this one I want panned left. This one I want panned right. Now, one of the things you could do is maybe introduce like different tuning. So let's say if we go into VariAudio here, and let's edit the VariAudio. Let's move. Okay, so now when we play,
2 grown daughters are married with kids of their own.
so maybe what you could do just for like little variations is just kind of come over here. So let's say we have these 2. Now these are perfectly the same recordings.
Now our 2 grown daughters are married with kids.
And maybe I want to correct
of their own.
the tuning.
And I know your dad's pretty happy now, 'cause what began as our first kiss.
So, maybe you could introduce tuning on one of the tracks, and this could also be in the form of, like, if you don't want to do VariAudio, so let's say we duplicate that particular track, we haven't done any VariAudio, is just coming over just to have like a little bit of, let's get to an insert. And if you go to pitch shift, we could go to the pitch correct. And, here we could just say, okay, this is going to be in the key of A. And tune one of them.
It started all of this
So this way, like one, it's not going to be exactly the same repetition. So if you wanted some natural variations, and you know, also you could do, since it's going to be kind of perfectly in time, is, you know, feel free to grab the if we go to our free warp tool, and you know, if we want to not have all the timings absolutely perfect, you know, you could do stuff like, okay, I want this note to be slightly late, I want, you know, so at this point we could just say, okay, this note we want to be slightly off so that we can make it a little more humanized.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
So it's like, okay, when we come here, we want the word home to be just a little bit later.
The coach to ferry us home.
So you can introduce some different vibes like that. You could also take, you know, one of the tracks here and just choose to quantize it a little bit. So let's say, okay, I want to make this quantize to 8th notes. So just go to my quantize panel. And we say, okay, I just want to quantize this, so we could do just a little bit of rhythmic correction on one of the tracks and not the other. So those are a couple tips and tricks you could do to take a duplicated voice and not have it exactly the same. Try changing some of the pitch. You could also, you know, come over here. So you can see that's the effect of the quantizing. So, but you could, you know, do some warping, do some different tuning. You could also just come over and, like, if we want, you know, one thing you could do probably from scratch. So let's say I'll just remove this track, you know, like a classic pitch detuning. So let's say we'll take this, let's duplicate the track again.
7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
So I'm going to take this event and let's just do fine tuning. And this will just, we could increase by cents so that the left and right channels are slightly.
I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
You get kind of like a doubling effect.
Oh, I remember the day that we went.
So you could do stuff like that and just kind of just doing slight fine tuning as well on one of the tracks as opposed to the other. And that little bit of tension could make it sound thicker and a little more natural and doubled. All right, so we see from Yazian Trabi, is there a way to get random voices in Cubase? So I'm not sure if you want to, you know, if you wanted to, so I'm not sure if you want like a melody to be randomly created, or if you're starting from scratch. I mean, you could. You know, so if you wanted to kind of, you know, let's take this particular voice here.
Waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
If we go to under modulation, like if you wanted to.
It caught my breath while you called me to.
So here is a plugin that you could use, and this.
Well, even now, I'm a long time ago.
And you have slight delays.
There was no regret right after that guard.
So I'm not sure if you wanted a random melody to be generated, or if you wanted to if you wanted to just kind of randomize the voice a bit. All right, so we see question, is it possible to draw automation on more than one track simultaneously? So I think it's gonna, like, if we're drawing in, let's say if we put these into so I think that as we, like, work with automation, if we're selecting, let's see if we can, if we select this automation. So, I think probably the fastest way to do it, like as we do this, since the mouse can only be in one particular event at a time, is I'll just go to a different project to show this. So let's say I want to take these drum tracks, and if we wanted to assign them, let's say, to a VCA fader. So I'm going to assign these to a VCA fader. Okay, and let's say as we're automating this, I want this VCA fader, and I'm going to switch my remote control, my MIDI remote here, my Chord Nano. We're going to switch this to mixer. Okay, so this is now controlling my group. So I will come and write automation on these and on my VCA. So now I'm only moving one fader. But when we look at our automation for the particular tracks, the automation has now been written in for all of the tracks at once. So if they're all assigned to a VCA, you could use, and let's see what happens if we just draw in for the VCA. So if we just draw in on a VCA, you can see that those changes are just reflected on all of the tracks as well. So once all the tracks are set to a VCA, you could now just kind of draw in on the VCA, and those automation changes are automatically reflected. Okay, so we see question, hi, how to export Apple Music spatial audio from Cubase / Nuendo. So, it's using, I believe that the Apple Music will just take your ADM file. So if you have a particular project, so let's come over here, if we go to your ADM authoring, so once you have everything that's kind of set up, and we've gone through the setup assistant, so if you wanted to get played on the various devices, let me just change my sample rate here quickly, 48K. And so at this point, once you have that all done, you would just choose to export the ADM file. You could upload that to iTunes or to your other deliverable services, and that's what's going to be used for the for your spatial delivery. So I think that would do the trick for you. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Find my spot. All right. Okay, so you see influential Gurning just doesn't like the rent-to-own model. So, and I think, you know, with our discussions on the Splice, and I see influential Gurning says no, never rent, own. So I think what the Splice pricing is a rent to own. So you could pay installments while you use it, and then once all your installments are paid, and then you own the license. So it's not necessarily a subscription model that you have to continuously pay. So if you paid off, you know, if you are on like a 2-year plan at 2 years and you made all the payments, at that point you own the license. So it's kind of a rent to own model. Okay. Right, Patrick asks, hi Greg, how did you link the range selection to the left and right cycle markers so that the cycle moves with your range selection? So that's just going to be a preference. So when we come over here to preferences, we could say under editing cycle follows range selection. So we see this here. So preferences to editing cycle follows range selection. So now as I grab a range, the cycle markers automatically follow the particular range, just like so. So again, preferences to editing, cycle follows range selection. It's a handy preference. Okay. Right, Jason Bundy asks, hi Greg, is there a way to see all of the files processed via DOP in the audio pool, including the original files? If not, is there a key command? Thank you. Okay, so let's take a look. So let's say if I've done processing on a particular file, so I select that, we get to the audio menu to processes, or I'll just do a plugin. So I go to my default, and let's say I want to add a flanger. We'll do a direct offline process here on that particular file. Okay, so now as we listen, our bass is now going to be flanged. Coming up right here. So that's been processed offline. And let's take a look at our pool window. Let's see if it's, so when we do this, like our bass file, and I think that this indicates, I'll remove just this, let's delete. So you can see that under status, that as soon as I put a plugin on, that this indicates that this particular file has offline processing on it. So you could see that, and in the actual project folder, we can see that you'll have kind of an audio folder. So I'll come here, so let's say this is where our project is, and when we click here, that we can have kind of like your edits folder is automatically created as soon as we do processing. So you could see exactly which files, and you know, so at that point we could see the files that are created. They're going to be placed into the original files, I think, or the, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that the original files will go into the pool, and then there's the edits folder that's created as soon as you do some offline processing. But that's how you could see if there's been offline processing to the file. And I think even if we wanted to, so you could just see directly right there on that file. And then you could just go to, select that file in the project. So if I had this selected, we go to our media menu and I say, okay, I want to, which file was selected. I can now just say select in project, and that would select that. And then, we could double click there and go to, if you hit F7, at that point you could see what particular process was done and remove it pretty easily, like so. All right, so we see 339 Lenny. Hello, Greg. I upgraded from Cubase 10 to Cubase 13, and now there are some keyboard commands that I use not available. For example, I had to shortcut to activate and deactivate a track. Is this a bug? So I think that there's still a function for that. So once we go, let's get to your key commands. And it's going to be found under the audio menu, and it's going to be disable/enable track. So make sure that that key command is automatically, so that function is still in the program, but make sure that you have a key command assigned right there, but it's found in the audio category. And I know a lot of people use it for virtual instrument tracks, but we can see disable/enable track is the command option. I think this is one that I put in, but that function is still in 13, is available, but you could check your particular keyboard shortcut and see if it's assigned there. So see Patrick just not being able to get his question in. He says, after a while, both messages disappear. So sorry we haven't seen them. But sometimes it happens. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to keep my eye out for it. All right, so we see Michael Teams granting Gerald Ely 1 gallon of key lime pie ice cream. Sounds good. All right, great to see inactive user on. We have Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland, as well as Uno Momento. All right, Structure-DMB asks, hi Greg, hope you're well. Thinking about buying Cubase 13. Can you tell me the difference between Pro, Artist, and Elements? Also, do you have any tips on cleaning up unwanted pops and crackles on sounds? So, there's a pretty detailed comparison chart between them, and it could be like thousands of different features. But if you just kind of Google, Cubase comparison chart, so we can see compare the versions of Cubase. And here we can see, okay, show all. And at this point, we could see the 5 different versions of Cubase. So we can see kind of more kind of global overview stuff, if they have VCAs or not. How many instrument tracks. And then there's more, You know, does it have MIDI remote? Yes. Does it have this? And more detailed features. So you could kind of go through this particular, you know, list right here. So just do a Cubase comparison. And if you have questions on what something is, like I see that it doesn't have profiles. What is a profile? You know, please just let me know. But this will give you a pretty good overview of all of the feature comparisons between the different levels of Cubase here. Hang on just one second. All right, apologize, my son just popped in. It's today off from school, teacher work day. All right, so we have inactive user asks. I want to ask if my project is broken because when my friend recorded a vocal take, the track turns into red while recording, and after recording turns black to the original pick color, but in my project, no. So I think generally, you know, like if we go to record a track, so let's say if I come here and I have, let's get to my routing, we have, okay, so I will just come here, and as we hit record, the track turns red, and then we stop, it goes back to the original color. So the tracks that are in record, so if we come here and record, that the tracks that are actively being recorded are turning red. So I think that's pretty common behavior. So, but let me know if yours is, so let me know if yours isn't turning red. But I think that's pretty much how it works. All right, we have Laurent, Yvonne, Francis, Francie checking in from France. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Michael Teams has granted my family, myself, 1 gallon of strawberry shortcake ice cream. Sounds lovely. Thank you so much. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. Great to see you on the Zoom meetup. We see that Lola, Gareth's daughter, says hi. So tell her hello for us as well. I wonder if it's pizza night. I know you and Lola used to do pizza on Friday nights a lot. All right, so we see from Dennis LaCroix, says, Greg, thank you for your constant work and knowledge. So you're welcome. Just glad to be able to help people. All right, Guy Shard, a fellow Virginian. Just curious where you are in Virginia. His question is there a hidden settings to make snapping to grid stronger while we zoom out? All right, so if, so it could be, I'll switch projects here. So there is an adaptive zoom function. So let's say if I'm here and we set our zoom to adapt to zoom. So right now, if I zoom in and I want this to snap to the grid. So I'm going to turn on J, so snap. And as we, so let's say I'm going to I'll move this event over here. All right, so now we're here, and as we snap, so at our zoom level where the space between here and here is 4 bars, I could just have it snap like so, the events, and make sure so now I zoom in, so now we could see the beats. So as we do this, now it's automatically going to snap to the beats. And I zoom in further where we see our 8th notes or 16th notes. So now we can snap to 16th notes at this zoom resolution. And I zoom in even further. Now we could probably do 32nd notes, etc. So once we kind of have this set up, we could, now I'm only going to be able to snap to like every 2 measures. So try setting this to adapt to zoom and see if that makes a difference for you. Yeah, and Guy, let me know where in Virginia you are. So I'm just in Alexandria between Old Town and Mount Vernon. All right, so we see perhaps similar to my question about fades, and the question is from Patrick, is it possible to assign a set transpose or clip gain value to selected audio files using a shortcut? Okay, so what you can do, let's say if I'm here, I think that we could come over here. Let's go to our key commands. So there is an increment event volume function. So now as soon as I do this, I'll just set it up in my MIDI remote so that we could see it. So I'm going to have this increment event volume. And then let's say the button below, I'm going to decrement the event volume. So now I could use a key command or a MIDI remote to increment or decrement clip gain volumes. And that would do it in intervals of 1 dB. So you could do that. And let's see for transpose. Might have to set up a so let's see if we could do all right, so we'll just listen to this just to get a reference pitch. Okay, so we might have to just trigger like a direct offline process. So let's do going to save this. Sorry, let me just. And I think that all right, so if I come here, let's remove. I think I might be able to trigger these via my MIDI remote. So let's see if we do this as favorite 2. And favorite 3. So I hit that, and so you could now just choose to trigger those particular elements. So if I now come over here, let's listen to our original. And now I hit my MIDI remote to go to favorite 3, and now we listen to it. So you could set up key commands to do transposition, which would in essence, so put it, once you have it done, copy it down to favorites, and you'll see like you could have 10 favorites that are accessible through different keyboard shortcuts. So you could do keyboard shortcuts for incrementing volume or for changing the pitch. All right, so we have a question. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask a question. I've been working for years with audio buses, particularly when mixing. Can I reproduce the same thing with group tracks? For example, I usually have a mix bus, then a foundation, a rhythmic section, lead, etc. Can I also create a system of groups and subgroups in Cubase 13? So yeah, definitely. So let's go take a look. I'll jump to this project. So let's say I want to have everything go, so one, you may not need to have a master bus. So a lot of people may have a master bus for processing. A lot of people will just use kind of the master fader here. So let's say I want to take all of these tracks. I'm going to hold down. I'll select all these tracks. And at this point, or we'll just start off and say, okay, I want my drums. So I'm going to add a group channel, right click, add a group channel to selected channels, and we'll call this my drum bus. And we'll make this our bass bus. And we can do the same for vocals, keys, whatever, guitars. So we'll make this our guitar group. And now I could take my group channels, hold down the Control Command key, if you need to route it to pre-master. So now as we do this, all my drums can be going here, my bass group, my guitar group. Then if I needed to have a pre-master, so you could have groups going to groups, cascading into groups, multiple stages, multiple levels, no problem, and be able to work that way. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Lauren. Sorry, never studied French. Garrett says we all scream for Team's ice cream. See, at 1:34, I made Gareth feel like I was taking hallucinogenics. I'll have to remember what it was when I do the index later tonight. Maybe it was the stacking multiple MIDI plugins. All right, wonderful to see Soren from Sweden. Thanks for joining us today. I think it's the celebration of spring in Sweden. Another attendee told me. All right, the Studio International asks, how would you tune a recording which is out of tune? Both the vocals and guitar tracks are out, have separated the two with spectral layers. So, let me know. So, like the vocals, we could obviously tune using VariAudio. So, if we wanted to, look at VariAudio, we could do our tuning here. If it's going to be like a guitar that's playing chords, VariAudio is going to be monophonic. So at that point, that may not be as applicable. But if the guitar itself is in tune, but but maybe it was like tuned, not to pitch, like all the guitar itself is in tune with itself, but it's actually low, like tuned down a couple of cents. At this point, you could select the guitar events and transpose directly here, and there's also a fine-tune function. So if it's just a little bit out, you could at this point do fine-tuning, and this will allow you to go at this is a semitone, this is a sense, so you could break it down into 1/100th of a frequency. All right, so we see from Patrick, says the visibility agent presets I saved in the mix window don't show up in the project window. How does this affect the 8 visibility agents I can assign shortcuts to? Okay, so probably you might have to make sure that we have, you see in the visibility tab here of sync project and mix console 1. So make sure that it's just this little icon right here. So I'll revert this to where we were. Okay, so let's say I'm going to have a visibility agent here, so I can go to, so I want to see only drums. So I'm going to come over here to my visibilities, and let's add a configuration. We'll call it drums. And now I only want to see bass and guitar. Okay, so I go to my mix console. And let's go to our configurations here. All right, and I'm just going to hide my input channels here. So now we could see that once we have that activated, so I'm going to come over here to my mix console, and when we go to our drums, we can see all my drums. I open up my mix console, all my drums are visible. So this way that they are in sync, but you have to just kind of click right here to make sure that the sync project and mix console, it has a check. And you can do that between the 4 different mix consoles, but do that, and then that way the configurations between the project window and the mixer are in sync. All right, so Pawan Kumar says, how did you resize the inspector window and channel window? Can you show how I can do it? So I think all you have to do is just kind of grab the edge here. So if I have a particular channel selected, we can see that we can have more space for control just by grabbing kind of the right edge, holding the left mouse button down, and dragging and extending that out. So let me know if that's what you wanted to see. Wonderful to see Val checking in from Vienna. Glad that you could make it today. So Gareth is asking if everyone wants a new Hot Mess album this year. I do. So, all right, wonderful to see Grant Nicholas from Baltimore. Says been meaning to ask how to edit several MIDI parts in the drum editor window. All right. So I'll do a new project here. All right, so I'll just add some MIDI tracks. Okay, so let's say I'll just drop some notes in here. All right, so we have multiple parts here. All right, so let's see if we select those and go into drum editor. So right now we opened up the drum editor and we could see all of the different parts. And let's say, you know, we want to edit all parts. So as soon as you come here, we could select the hand clap, the snare, hi-hat, kick, etc. And even if you wanted to come here, you could kind of pick and choose different elements right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Grant. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you are doing well. All right, so we see from it says we can add inserts and sends to group tracks, but as opposed to audio buses, audio isn't routed through them. I don't get it. And if they're not buses, why can't we create audio buses? So you probably think of the groups as being buses. So, but let me know if from what I showed earlier, if that kind of, I think it does what you want to do. But if not, leave a quick message and let me know. Okay, 808 King asks, hi Greg, I know you've been asked this question 1,000 times. I'm sorry. No worries. Yeah, you know, you could ask the same question over and over again. It doesn't bother me at all. How do you turn off or delete a bunch of plugins on one insert at a time? Thanks. Okay. Okay, so we have all of these plugins here. So I think if we just come over, excuse me, I'll clear my throat. If we click on this, on the edit channel settings, and I think it's, so that's how we could turn them all on. So let me just close all the windows. Sorry about that. All right. So here I just kind of clicked. We could turn these, we could bypass all the particular plugins. Just like that on that one particular track. And there is a logical, if you needed to, you know, so that would turn off all of the plugins. So just holding down, you know, just clicking right there. And if you wanted to reset this section, you could just hold down. So let's say I'm on this track. I got a bunch of inserts. All right, and if we want to get rid of all of these, hold down the Control or Command key. I'll ask you if you want to reset the section. Just say yes, and that will get rid of them. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Always wonderful to see Jeff Zabelski from Chico, California. So Suede TV and Recording Studio says, a tip I learned from seeing you do it is when you remove a plugin, you just take the mouse and highlight the plugin and flick it away. So cool. Yeah, it's kind of a satisfying thing to do. But if for those who don't know this trick, if you have a plugin on a particular track, you know, you could probably come over here, right click, remove, plugin, all that stuff, but you could just select a plugin and just kind of throw it off to the side, and the plugin just kind of disappears. So you can do that for single plugins, but for multiple plugins, you could do the other way. But that is like just a great kind of satisfying feeling. It's like a weird emotional connection you get with like silly things in software at times, but it works. All right, Barcos Castro asks, how can I move channels on the mix console? So unfortunately, you can't move channels on the mix console. I know it's a long-standing feature request, but if you wanted to do to move the channels, if you move the channel here, so I'll just go to the mix console so we could see it, and I could select this particular channel and say, okay, I want to move it there. And that's automatically reflected in the mix console, but unfortunately you can't just move it in the mix console. Maybe in the future. I know people have been asking for it for a long time, but you could move it in the project window, and within the project window that is reflected automatically in the mix console. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. I see in the future Pablo is on. He's great. We have a full hot mess reunion. All right. All right, Larry B asks, hi Greg, I'm moving from Cubase 12 to 13 on Windows 10. My Kai MPK 249 4x4 MIDI pad is rotated, maybe routed in Groove Agent. That is my row 1 is now column 1, same project. Song opened in Cubase 12 and Cubase 13. Okay. So it just says my Kai MPK 249 4x4 MIDI pad is rotated in Groove Agent. That is my row 1 is now column 1. Same project sound. So it looks like, you know, so check. So I'm not sure if it is, if those notes, all right, so with Groove Agent, so let's come over. All right, so it looks like maybe the pads were kind of lined up here. And instead of going horizontally, maybe they're going vertically. So if that's the case, you know, what you could do, so, you know, maybe, you know, so I don't think there's anything in Cubase that would do that. So if you're hitting the pad, like I'm hitting the pad on my MIDI controller now, that that these, you know, that those MIDI notes that the controller is transmitting is what is coming in, you know, so the Groove Agent is reflecting what MIDI notes are coming in from the particular controller. One thing that you can do out of curiosity is if you go to like the MIDI inserts and go to our MIDI monitor, you know, see that if these are sending, like when you hit the pad, you can see what note is actually coming in. So let's say this is I have a 4x4 or 3x4, but this is like my bottom right, and that's going to be D sharp 1, and that is what we see reflected here. So if this, you know, if this incoming MIDI note is, instead of going to D sharp 1, is going to C2, then that would probably indicate that it's going to be something on your MIDI controller. So, but, you know, try going to the particular, you to the MIDI inserts and go to the MIDI monitor plugin and make sure, that the controller is transmitting the right MIDI notes. Because usually it will reflect whatever is being transmitted into Cubase and will capture and play that. So, and I don't think going from 12 to 13 would have any changes in that unless you are specifically rerouting pitches through a input transformer, but that would be something you would have to, specifically set up to do. But, check to make sure that the notes that you're hitting from your controller are showing up in the MIDI monitor plugin as expected. All right, so see from Joe Tawasha, can you please post the email address to mail questions to? Sorry, first time posting. You could just simply ask your questions in the chat, like just where you answered that question. But if you want to send one in advance that's more detailed, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, Patrick Emmanuel A asks, I have a reverb send tracks, which I send more instruments into that, but I want to EQ only the drums output with reverb effect. Is it possible? Okay. I have a reverb send track. Okay, so let me just create scenario. Okay, so I'm just going to add an effect send of reverb. So I'll just add an effects channel. If I activate the project, that would help. Okay. Okay, so it says I have a reverb send track, so when I send more instruments into that, but I want to EQ only the drums output with reverb effect. Is it possible? So if all of these tracks are going to my reverb, so I'll come here, let's just put Q-Link on. Okay, so let's say all right, so we have multiple tracks going through our reverb, but I want to EQ only the drums output. So, I'm not sure if you want to EQ the reverb on the drums. So that's not going to be possible because, if you EQ the reverb, that's going to be on everything. But if I send these drums to a group channel, I'll make this a stereo group here. All right. That I could EQ my drums here. And that's still, each of my drum tracks is now feeding my reverb. So if I want to come here, but it's not going to be where we could, if multiple sources are being fed into our reverb track here. So if we listen, that, you know, I would also be EQing the reverb of the guitar and other instruments in addition to the drums, because they're all being kind of going to the same, into the same effect send. All right, Pawan Kumar asks, how can I change the order of my sample folders appear in MediaBay? Doesn't display them in order I have arranged in my files. Please help. It messes up my workflow. Okay, so I think, so let's come over here to MediaBay. All right, so let's say I want to go to, we'll go to, let's say, this computer, document, and let's say where I have different files. All right, so as we can see here, we go to projects. So, you know, these are just going to show up, and I think this is going to be pretty common in, you know, most kind of databasing type applications and file management. These will show up, you know, so I'm not sure how you have your orders showing up, but like as we look through your folder structure, that this will kind of look at it alphabetically. So we could see that as we do this, that the files will show up alphabetically here. So, and let's say if we search by name, we could switch that, but let's, you know, so you could search by date if necessary. So there's a lot of, you know, I want to search by date modified. So let me know it, like how you, if there's a particular criteria that you have for the order of your folders, but you could change just like you do on your standard kind of, you know, Windows Explorer or Mac Finder file management. You know, you could change those. So, but let me know what criteria you have, Pawan Kumar, on your, how the sample folders order is set up. All right, so we see David M. saying hello to everyone, and hello to me and all the Cubase students. All right, Yazian Trabi just asks, hi Greg, how do I find VariAudio in Cubase 13? Where is it and how does it work? So VariAudio is part of the sample editor, and all you'd have to do is double click on an audio file, and then that will take you into the sample editor. When we come over to VariAudio, we could just click here. It's going to do the analysis of our VariAudio files, and we'll just come, and as we turn this on, now we could do so often it's going to be used for vocals, but at this point we could correct the pitch. If something is out of tune, we could adjust, we could correct the pitch, we could adjust, you know, we could straighten vibrato on particular words, so we could do lots of editing. If I want to change the length of particular notes, if I wanted to adjust the volume, at this point we could just kind of come over here, adjust the volume, or lots of different controls that we could do here. So again, just double click from the project window, come over to the VariAudio tab once you're in the sample editor, click here to edit the VariAudio, and then you could do all of your tuning built right into Cubase without having to buy a different. All right, Patrick Maynardville A asks, is it possible to print or render instruments MIDI sends to different tracks? Let's give it a try. All right, so I'm going to come over here and let's add, I'm going to do this as a rack instrument. Let's get to a retro log track. All right, so I'm going to now go to different instrument. So let's make this like a Howling Sonic. Just take off the arpeggio here. Okay, so I want to take this sound here. I'm going to play this chord. Let's go to my MIDI sends here. Oh, sorry, let me add. I'm going to do this from a MIDI track. Okay, so now we will come over to the MIDI sends, and I want to take, let's say, in our Apache SX, and send it to our Howling Sonic. All right, so right now I have kind of the pad set up here, and then we're going to just be triggering the arpeggiator is being sent out here. All right, so I'll just record just some notes here. All right. Okay, so let's say now we have this. All right, so now we play this. So this is playing just chords, which is now triggering the arpeggios there. And see if I need to create a blank part, but let's take these two. That's what happens when we go to MIDI to freeze. MIDI modifiers. Let's So I know that we can take, I'll just make sure that's, all right, so let's see if we can just record. Let's see what happens if I record on both of the tracks. So it's going to sound. But it looks like it's going to be kind of the same parts. So it might be just kind of playback. Let me just. Yeah, so it might be just kind of a playback only thing since it's sending it out in real time. So unlike the MIDI inserts where we have the record option here, I don't see the record option on the MIDI send. So it might be just a real-time generation that may not be able to be captured back in. Sorry about that, Patrick. All right, so we have Constantine Gogu just saying hello from Romania. Thanks for joining us today. You see Gareth saying hi to my son as he popped in. Always wonderful to see Pablo Vasquez from Galicia, España, wonderful drummer of Hot Mess. Glad that all four of us can make it today. All right, DJ Mixes asks, hi Greg, I have the following question. When I start Cubase, I can't watch your live stream. It only works when I close Cubase. Does it have something to do with studio settings? So it could be, you know, depending on your audio interface. So let's say if we go to your studio setup, we can now come over, try to go to your audio system and try to click on release driver when application is in background. So if you want to use the same audio interface to listen to the live stream that you have in Cubase, you could just, you know, try toggling this setting right here under the studio setup. If you have like a Steinberg UR interface, you could actually have different drivers for the same interface, one for streaming and one for the DAW. So, and if you wanted to have one for your voice so that you could do talking, so with new UR interfaces, you could basically have it function as 3 separate interfaces at once and kind of break up the functionality. But you could give that a try. All right, so we see that Gareth is making burgers tonight with his daughter. Tell her we all said hello. All right, we see from Darren Mack, Greg Undo, the man, the myth, the legend. Happy Friday. That's very kind of you. I'm humbled. I'm just an Oompa Loompa in the world of Willy Wonkas. All right, question from Pablo. How can I insert bars in a specific place in the project or delete them too? I've forgotten. Okay, so let's go ahead. All right, so I'm going to grab the range selection tool. So I want to insert bars. I could do this kind of globally if I hold down my control and shift key. So let's say I need to insert this amount of time. So I need to insert this amount of space. So I'm going to select that amount of space with the range tool. I'm going to activate the project so I don't have to get an annoying message when I wonder why it didn't work. And as I do this, we're going to go to Edit, to Range, and then we're going to Insert Silence. And that's going to bump everything, including automation, over to the right. So once again, select the amount that you want to insert or delete, go to Edit, to Range, and come over here, Insert Silence. Now if we wanted to get rid of that, again, Edit, Range, and then you could just choose Delete Time. So grab the Range tool, select the amount of space you want to work with, and then under Range, Insert Silence to add silence, or Delete Time to just get rid of that particular area. All right, so we see Guy Shard. I can't believe I missed that after all this time. Thank you so much. You're welcome. I wish I knew what it was. All right. I'll have to review it on when I do the index later tonight. All right, Yazin Trabi asks, how can I save a project automatic? So there is an autosave function. So if you go to your preferences and go to Cubase, we'll go to General, and you'll see autosave. I have mine disabled, but it sets up for auto saving every 10 minutes, and you could adjust the amount as well. So if you don't do anything for 10 minutes, if you make no changes, it won't automatically save. So it's any time that you make a change in 10 minutes, it will just simply back up right at that point and it creates a .bak file. So wonderful to see Pablo on today. Hope all your travels have been going well. Guy Shard is in Spotsylvania County, so not far from me. Thanks for joining us today. I grew up in Dale City. Not too far, about halfway from in between. All right, so we see from Jazz Dude, please show the refurbished Beat Designer in Cubase 13. I found it by accident this afternoon. All right, so let's go ahead and switch to a different project. Okay, so if you want to make quick drum beats, one great way of doing this is a MIDI insert, and we'll call this Beat Designer. So at this point we could say, okay, I just want to start off with a kick sound. So as we're playing here, we'll just say, we could set this up for, I want it to be, let's say 32 beats. Or, you know, so you could change the number of beats here. So let's say, as we're going along. And now we'll just come over and say, okay, let's put a snare. And I want to adjust the velocity. I could just move on the notes vertically here. Let's say I want to put a kind of a flam in. We could do this. I want to put like maybe just like a little more of a stick drag. And then we could put in, again, just come over here and say, let's put in a couple hi-hats. And we'll add some other Great, and let's put in some percussion. And then we could actually put different grooves on our percussion here. So you have two different swings. And let's just come over, put in so now if I wanted to switch to a different pattern entirely, I could come over here, and there's like all sorts of great things that we could do. So if we want to say, okay, I want to copy this pattern, let's go to a variation, and I want to paste this pattern. Then you could also do so we could have kind of our natural variations. And again, if I want to put in like maybe something like a 30-second notes as a pulse or triplets. And then you could also say on our variation pattern, I want this to be reversed. So we have our original pattern. And then, yeah, so this can run kind of concurrently with our project, or if you want to insert the pattern at the left locator on particular tracks, you could just kind of insert those, or just have it kind of play forever as a mini sequencer inside of Cubase. Okay, David M asks, hi Greg, I just got sent Zoom recordings of several people reading news items for me to edit. Some people on it need raising about 6 dB, easy to do manually, but could the logical editor be quicker? So I probably think, if you wanted to just, you could do a macro of, so let's say we have this, I wanted to make a macro of just increment volume. What you could do is we'll go to key commands, let's make a macro. Okay, so I'm just going to come over here. Let's say increment, search. And then I could just come right over here. So not necessarily probably a... So now as I want to select these clips here, I could say let's just increment event volume up 6 dB. And you could assign a keyboard shortcut, and anytime you need to do that to a particular clip, instead of doing it manually, you could just select everything on a track, execute that macro, and raise by 6 dB. So I think that might be a faster way than doing it manually. Everyone's happy that Pablo has made it to the live stream today. Or we'll see Matt Elston on. Jeff Sabelski says he finally got to oversleep today. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that tomorrow, but I'm sure my cat will wake me up at 5 a.m. wanting to go out bird hunting. All right, so we have Yoshi Piano 145 just saying hey there. It says just switched to Cubase from Logic Pro earlier this week. Congratulations and welcome to the live stream. And we're glad that you're a part of the community, and we hope to answer more of your questions and help you get up to speed with your Cubase. Always great to see Lawrence Koch from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Jim asks, how do you change the time signature from 4/4 to 3/4? All right, so if you want it globally for the project, once we come over here, we could see, if we kind of expand this out a little bit, we could see the time signature here. So if, an easy way of doing it is just to add a signature track. All right, so default signature is in 4/4, double click, type in 3, and then everything will be in 3/4. So try adding a signature track, and then you could go from 3/4 to 4/4 to 7/8 to 5/8, 2/4, cut time, whatever you need to. So just enter in. And if you have a particular pattern that's constantly repeating, you could do stuff like, okay, I want to take this. Let's make it. So if I need this pattern that's going to repeat over and over again, we could just duplicate, to select with the range tool and duplicate those particular patterns like so. All right, so we see Yoshi Piano 145. Is there any way to make use of the control key to use modifier tools, because it ends up triggering right click? So the control key can do a lot. So like you're probably on a Mac if you switch from Logic, I assume. So if you go to preferences, you can see the tool modifiers. So like when you're using the different tools, you can just switch the modifiers here for, so the control key is basically your command key on Mac. But if you're on Windows, you have Alt Option is kind of Mac and Windows, and Control Command, but you could change the, so if you want to assign different modifiers for like your command key or your Alt key or Command plus Option plus Shift, you can modify those particular changes. So depending on the tool you're in. So now when I come here, if I hold down Control, it's not necessarily like a right click, and you could just use kind of the right mouse click itself for that. Jeff Sabelski's describing a piece about where the orchestra kills the composer. Sounds interesting. I'll have to look it up. right. Yoshi Piano asks, why is there no zoom tool option for modifier tools? I want to make it like Logic Pro where I hold down Control and Option, my mouse turns into the zoom tool. So, some things are just going to be different. So if I wanted to zoom, I could just use the mouse scroll wheel. And, so if I want to navigate up or down, I use the mouse scroll wheel. If I hold down the Control key at this point, so if I hold down Control, we could zoom horizontally. If I hold down the Shift key, we can navigate horizontally. And if we hold down Control or Command plus Shift at this point, we can just zoom vertically. So again, you can, if I hold down Command or Control with my mouse scroll wheel, press the Shift key, I go vertically. Without Shift key, horizontally. Navigate here. And if I wanted to just hold down the Shift key by itself, navigate like that. So things will be different. And I know that you're going to have kind of muscle memory transitions going between the programs, but I think once you learn the way that Cubase does stuff, that it'll make a lot of sense for you. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me just find my spot. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone today. All right, so we see Barn Door Recording asks, is there a way to allow you to write an external effect to two different inputs and outputs? For instance, in one instance, it's a stereo pair, and another, it's two single mono units. So what you could do is once you have the audio connections and you go to your external effects, what you could do is save it as a favorite. So if you need to switch between dual mono and stereo compatibility, set up your different components here. So let's say this is going to be stereo, set it up as a favorite. And, when you just kind of right click here, you could just say add to favorites. And then that would be your distressor is stereo. Or if you wanted a distressor to be, two separate mono ones, you could save that as a separate favorite and just simply go select your favorites, and then you could just pick and choose which configuration of the hardware that you're using. Always wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. Thanks for being online today. All right, we see Gorgito says hello from Greece. I bought Cubase 13 Pro last week. How can we transport a part in our DAW? So I'm not sure of what you want. So how can we transport a part in our DAW? So I'm not sure if you want to move a part or if you need to export a part. Maybe if you could re-ask the question. So let me know kind of if you want to pass it like part of a project onto someone, or if you want to move events, let me know. Hopefully we'll be able to get to it before the live stream ends. All right, we see Ace Amadeus. Great to see you on. In Cubase 13, is there a possible way to extract drums from a mix without having to use Spectral Layers Pro? Thanks. So if you have a 2-track mix, you will need to have Spectral Layers Pro to take the drums out. Spectral Layers 1 that comes with your Cubase license will remove vocals, but it's not going to do unmixing of drums. So if you wanted to do unmixing, and I'll play just a little bit, those who haven't seen it, and I have one that's kind of already unmixed just to save time, so we don't have to wait a minute or two. So let's say if we have this going on. So, and if you want the drums, so if I wanted my guitar louder, my drums louder. So, but you would need to have the Spectral Layers Pro to do that inside of Cubase. All right, so we see from CNev's place, it says when exporting MP4 video from Nuendo, and I assume Cubase, the red and green color channels are transposed. Is there a way to address this? If not, could this be addressed in an update? So I haven't really run into that, but one of the things you can do, depending on which version you're on, so I think with 12, when we go to export video, you could, choose to render a new video file, or you could choose to replace audio in the existing video file. And that way it's not necessarily creating a brand new video file. It's going to use the same video file and just replace the audio within that video file. But that will keep kind of the original video file intact. So try using the replace audio and video and see if that works. And, it could be there's a myriad of codecs that are, that could add to the variability of that, but see if you do the replace audio and video, if that works for you. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you show how to make and save a chord pattern player pattern? All right. Okay, so let's come over here to chord pads, and we'll put on the roads here. Okay. All right, so right now I have it set to playing chords. I want to take this event here, drop it in, and then we're going to switch this to pattern. All right, right, let me just drag a different, I'll just find a different pattern here to make sure it's going to be fresh. Alright, so let's say drag, so I think we just alright, just and then let's see, once we have this particular pattern, I think we could just click here, save changes as preset, and then that is how you could just simply trigger that particular. Okay, so you see from Pawan Kumar, this is my criteria for the samples. It appears just as I sort them in alphabetical order. Once I add them to a favorite folder, they appear to not be in alphabetical order. They seem to be random. Okay, so let's take a look, and I'll add some folders to my favorites. So let's come over here to MediaBay. Okay, so I want to let's see, add favorite. Add favorite. Add favorite. Okay. All right, so I'll pop over here to MediaBay. Let's go over here to favorites. So as we can see here, that these are all showing up alphabetically. And all the contents within the folder are showing up alphabetically as well. So let me know if mine looks different than yours. All right, C. Neb's Place asks, also an easy one. Where in preps can I change the cursor behavior when pressing stop from going back to the start position to staying in place? I used to know this one, but now I can't find it. So in 13, that moved from kind of an obscure preference location to something being really obvious, and now people don't know where to find it. So if you go to your transport and go to start mode, you want to say return to start position on stop. So you could turn this off and on right here. So again, transport, start mode, return to start position on stop. All right, Jazzy Lamel asks, greetings, Greg. Can you go over some tips and tricks on how to use the meters in Cubase? Okay, so a couple things that we could take a look at. Let me just... All right, so there's different meter positions. So, you know, if we want, when we're looking at meters, and I will just... Okay, so we can see our meter showing up directly here. Now, if we want to change metering colors, we could do this in Preferences, and we go to Metering to Appearance, and there are different types of meters. So you could have digital DIN, EBU, British, Nordic, CATS 20, 1412, plus 3 dB, plus 6 dB, plus 12 dB, different loudness units. So each of these different meter types, you could customize the colors. So if you go to CAT System 20, these will have kind of specific metering colors, but if you wanted to modify those, you could as well. Now the channel meter is going to be set up for the plus 3 dB. So if I wanted to, you know, add a point, I think just hold down the Alter Option key. We can say above this point, I want this to be obnoxiously magenta. So now when I hit apply, I hit OK. We could see that above certain thresholds, we could add different metering points and different metering colors. So if we now want to come over here, we can say, let's look at the preference, and I'll restore my defaults. Now, when we go to the meters here, we could also right click, and then we can see global meter settings. So we could say our meter position. So if we want to see what the input is before we, so this is kind of what's coming off of the disc. So as I raise the volume here and lower the volume, we don't see any change because we're metering the input source. But we could also change our meters to represent post fader. So now as I adjust, and we could also have our meters represent post panner. So I pan my kick track predominantly to the right. So we could come over to our post panner inserts, and now we'll see that our panning information automatically take effect right there. So you have kind of 1 meter in predominantly here, but you also have kind of your full meter here, and at this point we could choose where you want it to be DIN, and this, a lot of these settings make more sense because they're more cumulative as opposed to the individual sources. So if you want to check out EBU, if you're doing work for the BBC, you're doing, you know, CATS 20, 14, 12, or if you wanted to do loudness metering, so this would be more for dealing with loudness units and LUFS. So we could now come over here and see the loudness metering, and we can set different thresholds for that by going into our loudness meter settings. So we can say I want my reference to be minus 23 LUFS for broadcast or minus 14 LUFS for streaming music services. We could set that, and that will give you an idea of some of the different metering options that are available inside of Cubase. So let me know if that's helpful, Jazzy Lamel. All right. So we see Pablo says it'd be great to introduce Beat Designer and a MIDI editor when you are with Groove Agent. It'd be a fast way to create beats. I always still like creating beats just using the built-in drum editor, but maybe I've been doing it that so long and I find that super fast and flexible as well. We see from Alexandrina, it says Cubase rocks. All right, so we see a question, how can I show the channel tab on a selected track? So if you click on if it's this, you know, now what you could do if we right click and we have this set to always on top, let me just, this will automatically follow. So if I come here, I have that change, that these changes are automatically following the selected channel. So, but to open it, you could just click on like the edit button here, or the edit channel button there. And if you have that always on top, whatever channel is selected is what's viewed. See, Memento saying, guys, weekend and no gig. So now you're going to miss it. All right. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see, hi, when Cubase will have integration with Chord PA5X Pro. So let me take a look what the PA5X Pro is. Just to make sure it's, I'll look at it on my phone real quick. See what device it is. All right, so you see it's a kind of 88 key arranger workstation. So a lot of times arranger workstations could be very insular, like they don't really, you know, they're kind of very self-contained. So I'm sure you could record, obviously you could record the sounds in Cubase as a MIDI instrument. So you don't need to do anything special with that, you know, connected probably via USB. and you could record it as a MIDI instrument and sound source. Probably the tones that, like the arrangement parts, if you're looking for integration of that, those, I haven't seen an arranger keyboard yet that sends that information externally. So, you know, if you're hoping to have it play like your virtual instruments, that there's probably a lot of different techniques that are used that are proprietary to those particular instruments, and that's just kind of the standard state of affairs for virtual arranger workstations. But let me know like what integration you're expecting with it. But you know, if it transmits MIDI, it could work and integrate with Cubase. All right, we see from Jim, just says, thank you, I'm new to Cubase 13. This is really cool. Well, congratulations on joining the Steinberg family, and we hope to see you on many more live streams, and we hope to help you along your way. All right, Jesus Ruiz asks, when are we getting the option to invert shift plus scroll wheel? So I think it kind of makes sense that as we go, to me this seems natural. Like if I want to go further in a project, I want to go further down the score, that I would, as I go downward, that I go later in time, and I want to go to the top of the song, that I move up. So I don't think I think that's pretty intuitive to me. So when we navigate using the shift plus scroll wheel, but I'll pass it along as a feature suggestion regardless. All right, so we see from Mr. Greg G, orchestral composer. Greg, there was a bug in Cubase 12 where you couldn't recall expression maps via track archives import when these tracks were located in a folder. When importing everything, including the folder itself, the EM wouldn't let, the expression map wouldn't load. Is it still there in 13? Let's go take a look. All right, let me see. Okay, so we'll listen, take a look at this. Okay, so these are all in a folder. And let's just make sure my violin. All right, so I have that. Let me just. Okay, so we have this saved. It's in a folder. I saved a project new. I'm going to come over. Let's do a new project. Create empty. And I'm going to import. And let's see if it's track archive. Yeah, it said track archive. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do it as a project here first. Then I'll save it as a separate track archive. All right, so I'm going to say, I think it goes violin 1. All right. And I'm going to go back and just draw in some expression map changes on the original project here so we could see those just to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to export this as a track archive. So I'm going to export selected tracks. Okay, so we'll import the track archive. So that looks like it imported just fine. And we'll do import tracks from project. And that imported just fine. So it looks like that's squared away. Let me know if that makes sense or if I did it incorrectly. All right, great to see Darren Flake joining us. Wishing everyone a happy Friday. See Jeff Zabowski saying it is Concert Sunday featuring young artists, so sounds great. All right, we have a question. Is it possible to record using more than one interface at a time? For example, using interface A to record drums and interface B to record vocals. So generally not, because the two interfaces are not going to be synchronized. Obviously when we work with programs like Cubase, we're dealing with everything at sample resolution. So most of the time when we're doing this, If you use more than 2 audio interfaces, you can do it on Mac OS through something called aggregate devices. It will compound the latency, and it's more than likely that the 2 sources will be out of time with each other. So when Cubase is ingesting or playing back audio, it's important to know where the samples are, and for those samples to play back and be captured in sync with each other through the audio clock. So once you have the audio clocks of the 2 devices aren't synchronized, that those 2 recordings could constantly be out of sync forever. So it may be very subtle, but it's still out of sync. Now, depending on your architecture, so if you have something like a Dante-based system where the clocking is handled internally through the Dante infrastructure, you could take multiple audio interfaces for Dante, connect it all together, and the clocking is unified so that you could have 3 or 4 different audio interfaces, connect them via Dante, and have that work. But again, it's not, usually you can't cascade multiple USB devices. It's the nature of a USB audio interface. If you have older FireWire interfaces, if you have older PCI card interfaces or Thunderbolt, you have the options of being able to cascade often the same particular interface, running multiple instances of the same interface, but using 2 different interfaces of 2 different companies, it's 99.9% of the time going to be out of sync, which is why it's not done. Okay, so you see clarification from Gorgito. Hello again, Greg. I mean, how can we take apart, copy and paste it from C major to D major, for example? Okay, so let's say I want to take, thank you for the clarification. All right, so let's say I have this part here. All right, so let's say I'll cut this in half and I want to duplicate this. So now I'm going to take this and just transpose it up 2. So let's say we're going from C to D. So now and if we want to do this kind of the same thing with an audio event, I could just come here. Let's play this. All right, and I want to make a copy of this. I'm going to select that and transpose up 2. So yeah, you can just kind of copy and paste and then transpose the different events, whether it's audio or MIDI. All right, Darren Flake asks, when settings couple VCAs on groups, the last VCA that goes to the output can't link it anymore. If I want to add more VCAs, should I add them before the last VCA? So yeah, think of the VCAs as kind of being, you know, if we wanted to take our VCAs and add them to, you know, it's going to be kind of cumulative. So if we want to, say, we come here, like I see some people will have kick VCA. Snare VCA. So now we come over here. I'm controlling the snare. I'm controlling the kick. And let's say toms. Overheads. Okay, so now we have all these different VCAs, and then I think what we could do is just take and add a VCA track to, no, let me just, add VCA to the selected channels. So now I can control all my drums or individually. So you can do stuff like that. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, still reading through comments. So we see question, is it or will it ever be possible to sync two different DAWs internally? So yeah, you can do it, but realize, it's one thing if it's going to be syncing MIDI information, or if it's synchronizing audio. So realize that if you're going to do it correctly, where you're not going to have, the audio, two different programs sync, fall out of sync, you could do that, but you're going to need to send MIDI timecode out from one program to the other, and if you're using two different audio interfaces, you'll need to also synchronize their word clocks. But you could do it. Most people would do it on two separate computers, but you could definitely do it. But you just have to make sure that it's going to be sample accurate for the synchronization, and you'll need to have an audio interface that has like a way to synchronize the clock between two different audio interfaces. Okay, we see Best Screen Jesus says feature request to have dissolve part use last settings. It's putting a halt to a macro I'm trying to design. I'll pass that along, but it may not be the highest priority for new features, but regardless, I'll pass it along. All right, we have Typhoon Williams, just says, glad to be back. Great to have you here. All right, Gareth just asking, has everybody learned a ton? So hopefully, all right, let's go. I know we had some, Michael Team says, yep, and he's already written over a ton. All right, so I know we had some questions that were mailed in. Let me get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. And you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so the first question we had is, what are the differences between the stereo balance and the combined panner? Okay. Just revert this. Okay, so on stereo tracks, there's two different panners that are available. So you won't see this option, if we go to a mono track like we see here, we can see kind of the balance panner. But when we're doing stereo, it's going to be slightly different. And we could just take our stereo panner here, and when we kind of right click, we can choose between a stereo balance panner, which will allow us to take kind of our entire mix to the right or to the left. But if we wanted to kind of take the left and right channels and move it like, a bit to the left or to the right, that's when we'd probably want to use the combined panner. So now that I use a combined panner, I could just click. And at this point, we could have it be very narrow, but I could have it kind of panned narrow over to the right or to the left. If we wanted to make that wider. So this way I could pan it predominantly to the right. So instead of having like two separate knobs, I could have one knob. And the beauty of this also is I could come over here and I could invert the panning if you want to automate that as an effect. So when you see an orange panner, that means it's inverted, so we'll have the right channel kind of visually on the left. So if you want to do that as a quick automation trick, like a transition. So instead of having to have like a panner for the right and a panner for the left channel, we can just have one control and kind of get all of that functionality in one set of controls using the combined panner. So just kind of right click, you could switch between the balance or the combined panner. And that gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility, again, all with one set of controls. All right, next question. Hi, Greg. I'm updating some very old projects made with earlier versions of Cubase. Many plugins no longer work with Cubase 13, have been updated, and I no longer have access to said plugins. Regardless, they aren't loading and show no signs of what the preset settings of the plugin was using. Is there a way to see what presets and settings, example, cutoff, attack, release, etc., were used within the missing plugin, or so I can quickly recreate them in Cubase 13? Thanks. So if the plugin is not loading up, that's a function that's kind of outside of Cubase, and Cubase will go to the plugin. So it kind of goes out of the Cubase world into the plugin, and the plugin replicates the settings that it needs to recreate the sounds from the project. So if the plugin isn't loading up, there really isn't a way for Cubase to extract or to extrapolate or figure out what those settings were And I think even if it was, it's not going to translate. If you say, okay, the filter is this versus that, every filter is going to sound different. Every plugin parameter is going to sound different. So there's no real way of doing that. So sorry about that. And that's a good reason why to kind of keep older computers around before they die, so that you could migrate and check these things up. I know some people, as they're working on migrating projects, will open up, we'll come over and open every single project and take screenshots and store those within the particular, they'll open up every plugin in the project, save a screenshot as like a JPEG image, and store it within the track folder, so that all of those settings could be recalled manually if needed, or kind of replicated on a similar plugin. But there's no way for Cubase to kind of show the functions when that part of the program isn't available. Okay, so a question. Hi, Greg. In an automation lane, we are able to select a range and scale it vertically, moving the upper center dot in the region. Is it possible to do it more precisely with a project logical editor for that range? I mean, select an automation range and trim it up or down with a project logical editor. Yeah, so let's go take a look. So let's say we have automation going on here. Okay, so I want to select this automation and move it up or down. All right, so I'm going to select the track. Let's get to our project logical editor. All right, I'll just move this over so we can see this. Okay, and I think that there's some presets for this already. We'll just try to build it from scratch. So we want to, media type is equal to track, or is that our container type? And we want to say media type is equal to automation. And we'll say property is set to parent object is selected. And then I think, so we want to choose transform here. And here we'll say we're going to trim. And then we could increment value by 1 dB, or we could do it in percentages. So if I did this right, let's see if I, let's see if I remove the first one. All right, so say I bring this way down here. I'm going to close this. So now I have this track selected. I can just, let's open up the automation. And you can see now that as we do this, we'll start off here. This track closed. So we'll say media type is equal to automation. Property is set to parent object is selected, and in this case the parent object is just having a track selected. So now we do this and the automation is automatically just incrementing, and if we wanted that to inversely decrement, we could just choose decrement, and you can save that as a preset. And if you wanted to do it only within the selected range, you could set the position to do stuff like that as well. So, Okay, question. My audio interface manufacturer told me to change the block size of the interface. I need to do it within my DAW. Can Cubase change the block size without opening up the interface driver software such as Pro Tools, Logic, and Ableton? Otherwise, I'm not able to change the block size at all. So I assume the block size is the buffer size. So to do that, just come over here to your studio menu, to Studio Setup. We'll select your audio interface. At this point, go to Control Panel, and you'll see and this works for 99% of audio interfaces. There's a few outliers where you have to do it within the control panel only of the device, and here you could set the buffer size. I believe that's going to be what you mean by block size. Okay, let's jump back to our live chat. And again, you could always email questions to clubcubase at steinberg.de. Gareth says that like button needs some rendering. All right. Okay. All right, so we see from Typhoon Williams, it says, I'm working with the Phantom 8 as an interface and MIDI controller. What are some examples of using MIDI inserts? So one of the great things is obviously like the level of control for like doing arpeggiators. So when we want to look at it, we'll just come over here. So let's say I just want to activate this. So now we could just kind of play a particular chord and say, okay, I want to take this. I'll revert this project here quickly. So whether it's going to be an instrument track or an external MIDI, we can come over here and just say, okay, I want to go to like my ARP. So I'm just going to kind of hold out just a chord here. And then if you wanted to change the note length, let's say to 30-second notes. Now, where it gets also interesting is, because there's great presets. So let's say if I want to come over and load up like maybe guitar. So I'll just type in like a nylon guitar. All right, and then let me just turn on the delay. I'll just turn that off. All right, so I have this on. Now let's come over to our Apache SX, and we could say, let's come over here to different presets, and we go to the factory presets, and let's come over here and say I want like an acoustic guitar. So you could kind of take any of your sequences and then be able to kind of So if you want to kind of create, very realistic stuff, so, and this will work with anything. So if you wanted to program beats very easily, like we showed the beat designer, or if you wanted to, do MIDI echoes every time you play. So let's say we'll change our pitch offset here. So let's say if I want to do that and combine that with like we showed earlier, let's take that guitar and so you could just kind of combine these different effects. So that will work with your external MIDI as well as internal MIDI for virtual instruments. So, Memento wants to get 100 likes today. It's probably a nice spring day for a lot of people. All right, so we see from the blue blanket, does anyone else out there have an issue with Cubase making loud digital clicks when looping an audio file, but the same audio and loop points in Logic and it's fine? Thoughts? So I haven't come across that. It would be interesting to see if it does this, if you're using the same buffer size in the two applications, but I haven't really had any issues with loud pops. But if you could let us know, blue blanket, which audio interface you're using, that may make a difference as well, and if it's being clocked. Okay, so we see from Jack Bourne, I used Library Manager to move my libraries around. Is there a way to return them to the default location? All right, so let's take a look at the Library Manager here. Okay, so as you know, what you can do is the ones that you want, you could just click on like the Move button here. And now when you click on Move, you could choose the location, the folder that you want them to. So I don't think it's like return to default, but let's go ahead and take a quick look. But when you go to the settings, you could just do that, but you should be able to select multiple folders, multiple libraries here, and move all of those around as you need it. So all right, Jeff Sabelski asked, Greg, can a VCA be used on all tracks before the master bus to adjust overall gain control to keep the master output at 0 dB? So you could definitely use a VCA or like a pre-master group for that. So definitely, if you wanted to take a look, we'll just jump to this example again. So as we're listening to this, if we need more gain out of our master bus and we have automation, I could adjust the VCA to increase or decrease gain as needed. Okay. Garrett says, Greg's setting controls for the heart of the sun again. All right. All right, so Typhoon Williams says the potential of the MIDI inserts is amazing. This compensates for the features the Phantom lacks. Thanks a million. Thanks a trillion, Greg. Thanks. All right, so we see from the blue blanket, it says regarding SMPTE ruler, project starts at 1 hour, add 2 seconds in front for 2-pop, and the ruler changes to show 58 seconds. It says to show 58 seconds, 1 hour, 3 seconds, 1 hour, 8 seconds, 1 hour, 13 seconds, which is useless. You lose reference to even numbers. Is that changeable? All right, so let's see if we could do this quickly. All right, so let's see. There's could be a couple different ways of approaching this. So let's say we go to project setup and we say our project start time is okay, so I'm gonna change my, all right, so we're at 1 minute and 2 seconds here. Or do I want to, you know, I change this maybe to 58. Okay, so all right, let me just, sorry, messed up my time code again, so let me just make this 59, 58. All right, so let's say now, all right, so now let's say we have, this is our start of our project, so I'm going to select this with the range tool. So we'll have that range automatically selected. Let's go to range and insert silence. So now everything is, we have, let me just make sure I did that right, sorry. All right, so now I'm going to take this range tool here, hold down Control plus Shift. All right, so now we have this. So I started the project at 59 minutes, 58 seconds. And now I'm going to select the first 2 seconds, go to Edit, Range, and let's set, we'll say Insert Silence. And that's going to move everything to start right at 1 hour. So let's take a look and open up our time display. And we'll switch this to seconds. And then right at the start of the project is right at 1 hour. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, so you see Michael Teen says 3 songs are coming for me soon, so looking forward to that. Should hopefully make some progress this weekend on some of them. Wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. Glad you can make it today. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. I think we're at the end of questions. Give it another 30 seconds or so. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. I want to thank everyone for taking time of your morning, evening, or afternoon to learn more about Steinberg products today. It's great to see so many new faces and so many regulars that are coming back. I appreciate everyone with all the wonderful questions on Steinberg products. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And if you want to search for indexes, you can go to cubaseindex.com. Also, I think I'll send a later, I have a document of all, it's like 650 pages. If you want a PDF file of all of the live stream topics, I'm happy to share that. So it's kind of a searchable database for you with the live stream links. So if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'm happy to share that. And let's see if there's any questions. I know I had some emails pop in. I'll check to see if there's any email questions in there. Okay, so we had a question that was just mailed in. says, hi Greg, thanks for hosting Club Cubase sessions. I'm not available to watch the live sessions, but always go back and watch the replays. I'm on a Mac running Cubase Pro 13. I have 2 questions. I have both the Nano Control 2 and Nano Control Studio that I can't seem to get working. In past versions, I would simply plug in the things would work. I'm trying to use the sliders to control MIDI CC information, specifically CCs 11, 1, and 7. No matter what I do, I can't get any data out of it other than the mixer fader volume changing. I've reprogrammed the sliders using the Chord editor to change the CCs, but still nothing. Using the MIDI remote function, what command is needed to assign MIDI CCs to a controller? Okay, so when you're using like the Nano Control here as a MIDI remote, once we have it kind of configured as a MIDI remote, it's taking the MIDI CC messages, and it's taking those particular MIDI CC messages and it's transmitting these to the functions that have been mapped. So so basically we're using the CC messages to control other functions in Cubase, and we could think of the CC messages as the language that's being used. So if I wanted to now add a MIDI track, so let's add a MIDI or an instrument track. I come up here. I could see we go to the MIDI inserts, and I go to my MIDI monitor. It's transmitting MIDI data, but it's not actually being seen. So what you could do is if you go to the settings here, we go to the script, we want to go to the MIDI remote manager, go to the scripts, and what we could do is just to disable the script. Now that the script is disabled, the MIDI controller is going to transmit the different controller numbers that are assigned in your Chord software. So if I wanted to now come over here and adjust the settings in the Chord software and change the MIDI CC values, we could do that. But once we go to the MIDI script and we choose to go, let's say, to our scripts here, and we go back to our Nano Control, that, at this point when we enable the script again, the MIDI remote is taking over the MIDI messages, and it's not going into the script. But again, when we turn that off, so just disable the script, and then you could use it to write CC values. So again, just kind of pop over here to scripts and enable the script. And now it's functioning as a MIDI remote. So if it's working as a MIDI remote, it's not going to transmit the MIDI CCs to the program. All right, and there's a second part of the question. It says, I'm using a Focusrite Scarlett 18i20 interface. Whenever I load Cubase, the output has to be reset. I make sure to boot up the interface several minutes prior to Cubase, and I still have to manually set it. Is there a way to have that set at a global level so that it stays? So generally, this, the one thing, so I'm not sure if you're on Mac or Windows, but, unless something is kind of taking over the Focusrite interface, so you may have to set up the Focusrite interface to have, to share between different applications. So if you're using the Focusrite to play back YouTube audio and the Focusrite to play back Cubase, you may have to, set it up so that the audio outputs can be shared in a multi-client fashion. But I never really have to reset I don't have a Focusrite interface, but I don't have to reset it every single time. So I think something is taking control of the audio outputs of your Focusrite and not allowing it to be used in Cubase. So, all right, I think we had another question. So we see, I think it's from Bob Swade. It says, hi, did not want to use up the live stream with this question. We'll go ahead and do it since we have some extra time. But I'm having difficulty opening up older .arr and .all Cubase and window projects. I did read a lot of info online and downloaded Cubase SE3, but cannot authorize it on Windows 11. Any help would be appreciated and does not have to be on the live stream. So if you have, so SE3, you would need to have a license to open up SE3. So if you update it from, if you had like a USB-E licenser, that runs, anything past at your, SL, SE, SX3 and later, any of those, you would need to just simply install that particular program, so you may have to physically insert the USB-E licenser. So by, the Cubase 12 and 13 don't open up the earlier versions, because the logic is that if you had earlier versions of like, .arr, .all files, that, if you are buying Cubase new in version 12 and 13, that you don't have previous projects with it. So you need to install probably the USB-E licenser and be able to open up the SX3 or whatever license version that you have with that. So the Cubase 12 or 13 license isn't going to open up the earlier versions. But if you have an other Cubase version from, a license from Cubase SX3 forward, all of those will allow you to open and run the earlier programs. So if you could specify if you have the particular messages that, or the particular licenses, that would be great. All right, let's see if there's any other quick questions that have snuck in. All right, see Graham Witcher wishing everyone a happy weekend. Michael Teens is calling me Yoda again. Yeah, Michael Teens also is happy to see Pablo is able to make it today. All right, so we see the blue blanket says, can I write you and show you a video what I meant? So yeah, please, if you want to send a more detailed message and share a video, you could share it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Be happy to take a look at it. Wonderful to see Sable Winters in the live stream. Everyone's always happy when Sable is here. Reading through comments. All right, so we see from DCAR, we see, I noticed that when you set up an audio device as high precision, other apps can't use it. So the high precision is a 32-bit integer driver. So depending upon your operating system, a lot of programs don't, can play back 32-bit floating point, but they can't necessarily deal with 32-bit integer audio. And I don't think it's actually a part of like core audio on Mac OS, which is why we kind of wrote a specific driver to deal with 32-bit integer and 64-bit floating point audio. So most other programs aren't capable of handling the higher resolution files. So for the most part, outside of Cubase, you might have to run it just as a regular not using the high precision driver, because it's kind of like doing HD TV on a standard pre high definition TV. All right, Jeff Sabelski writes, Greg, sometimes I take a break, keep the project open, set the PC to sleep, then turn off the MR816, then wake up the PC again, but Cubase doesn't like the sound card turned off. Any suggestions? So a lot of times, depending upon your FireWire PCI card, sometimes those wake up from sleep, sometimes they don't. You may have to go into like the BIOS settings and see if there is a way, for it to automatically, to kind of resynchronize when the computer wakes up. But a lot of times, like back in the day with a lot of FireWire audio interfaces, you didn't want to hot swap it. There's always a possibility of it kind of freaking out. So it wasn't like USB where it was hot swappable. So just kind of the nature of a FireWire device. Okay, so we see what are advantages when setting up as high precision. So again, that's going to allow you to actually ingest a 32-bit integer audio recording. All right. So we see Sable Winters just asking how I'm feeling. So I'm feeling stronger and better today. So thank you for asking. Sorry I had to kind of bail out. I was getting pretty tired on the Zoom meetup. So appreciate you guys taking over, letting me take a nap. But feeling very well. All right, great to see Michael Pierce on. His tardy slip is hidden at the bottom of the pile. We hope that your session with the drummer without a drum set went well. So, Michael Teams just says we are glad Greg is rocking the Cubase. All right. All right, Michael Pierce has a quick question. Says Tuesday I was in a session and suddenly track lane stopped working. Everything recorded to lane 1. Checked record mode and all seemed right. Any thoughts on this? Thanks. Try to make sure that if you go to preferences to editing, try to make sure that delete overlaps got turned on. And then as you record over, those recordings will get erased. So again, try just to make sure delete overlaps, preferences, editing, see if you have that turned off. That would be helpful to check. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski says, thanks, Greg. Everyone back to the final read adjustments for Sunday concert. Have a great weekend. You as well. Good luck with the concert. See, Garrett says, health comes first, Greg. So, yes, it's nice to wake up and feel normal. So, but appreciate the kind words. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. Give it another 30 seconds or so. And again, thanks everyone for the wonderful questions. I hope everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And we'll be back on Tuesday, May 7th. It's my mom's birthday. So we'll have everyone say hi. I think she watches live streams periodically, so she may watch. So we'll say happy birthday to my mom on Tuesday. All right. wait and see if there's any other quick questions. If not, we will go wrap up. Michael Team says, happy birthday to my mom. So yeah, this is always the busy time of year for me. It was my anniversary yesterday, my wife's birthday on Sunday, my mom's birthday on Tuesday, and Mother's Day. Sometimes they all come within like 4 or 5 days of each other. So it's a lot of juggling this time of year. All right, so I think we are out of questions. We'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you everyone so much again I appreciate being a part of such a wonderful community, and just really always grateful for everyone for making it such a great experience doing the Club Cubase live streams. I look forward to doing them all the time, and it was great to see everyone on the Zoom social meetup, and we will go ahead and see everyone back on Tuesday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoy the nice spring-like weather. And take time to go outside, get some fresh air, and please stay healthy. And we will see everyone back on Friday, or back on Tuesday. Thank you so much, and take care. Goodbye.